In this video, we're actually going to create or construct our first pipeline. You recall in a prior video we did a bit of an introduction on pipelines, and I'll just do a recap here before we start again. So remember, we've got a concept of an onboarding job. I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between onboarding jobs and other jobs that you have in your system. Essentially, what we want to be able to do is anytime we have an ad hoc candidate that's coming into our system, not for a specific job vacancy, we want to get them into the process so that we can get them ready to work in the most efficient way possible. So you can see here that this is a generic onboarding job, and it's using the generic onboarding pipeline. The generic onboarding pipeline has a registration phase, a right to work phase, triage, reference check, induction. And at this point, they are ready to be accepted into jobs because we've captured everything that we need to, and therefore will be no problems further downstream, i.e. we've got their super choices, we've got their tax details, we've got their bank account details. So how do we configure this particular pipeline? So let's go and have a look again, just a quick refresher, and then we'll go and create it. So the way we configured this pipeline, and we did so within our settings. Remember, only your account administrators have the options of doing this. And this is the pipeline that we're creating, the generic onboarding pipeline. And it has these stages. Each stage has one or more actions on it. For example, the registration phase has a application form to complete. The application form itself has a notification that we want to send to the candidates when we drop them into a particular stage. So this is the pipeline that we're going to create. So I'll just drag this out of the way. Now typically the way I tend to start creating my pipelines is I like to do a little bit of a spreadsheet template. So you can see here that we've got a pipeline which has three definitions for it. It has the published pipeline, the unpublished pipeline, and the vacancy pipeline. For your contingent labour business, you simply do not worry about the vacancy pipeline. Vacancy pipeline is more used for corporates, recruiters, where potentially they have to get approval before a vacancy can go online, and we can build a complete process around the approval process. But for contingent labour and for our recruitment business, we're simply trying to get our candidates into our process as quickly and as seamlessly as possible. So we're focusing more on the unpublished candidate pipeline. So just to talk about what the difference is between a published pipeline and an unpublished pipeline. You may have a job that you may or may not post to your jobs board. If you post the job to your jobs board, then when a candidate applies for that job, they're going to go through the process defined by the published pipeline workflow. However, you can imagine that in this case, we want a pipeline just to manage ad hoc candidates that are coming through. They're not coming through for a specific job, and therefore by default, those jobs are not published. So we need a process around an unpublished candidate pipeline. Just bear with me. If you don't understand the difference between the two, I'm sure we get through the next examples, it will become much more clear to you. So essentially what we're saying is we want to build our pipelines with these stages. And then this is the order number that we're going to give the stage. The reason I put big number differences between the orders is because maybe later you say, oh, I want another stage. Well, you can just insert another stage by giving it a number greater than 200 and less than 300, and it will appear in the right order. So just to explain, so this entry stage here is we don't have any actions on this. We want the candidate to enter, and then as soon as they enter, be assigned to the next stage, because we can automate that, and I'll show you how that works. Then they're going to go to the registration stage, and when they hit that, we're going to ask them to complete a candidate registration form. But we're also going to need to have a notification template defined for them so that we can communicate with them, get them the email, get them the link so they can do that in a seamless way. Right to work check, no communications need to go out for that. It's simply we do a call to the Vivo, and when I configure it, this will become clearer to you. Triage and interview, again, just a nice blank stage, no actions to be completed, but typically people will come out of my check for right to work and go into a triage and interview stage. We then go to reference check. we will then complete a reference check. So therefore we need particular questions associated with that. We don't necessarily need to create any notifications, because in this example we're not sending the reference check to the referees directly to complete. We're going to ask somebody in the recruitment business that you run is going to be ringing the referees and completing those online, but capturing all the details related to the reference check. Then we're going to induct them, and when we induct them, we want them to read the handbooks, agree to policies, procedures, capture the tax details, capture the bank. And this is, again, I just repeat, as an example, but hopefully when we've been through this example, you'll understand some of the options that are available to you. Now this is really quite a useful process, because we actually want to do things backwards, because when I create the registration stage, I'm going to want to attach an assessment to it, and when I create the assessment, I'm going to want to attach the notification to it. So therefore, by default, I need to have my notification created so that I can attach it to the assessment, and I need to have my assessment created so I can attach it to the registration. So hence, that's why I often do a little spreadsheet like this, because it really helps me do things in the right order. So I'm just going to drag that over to the side now, and what we're going to do is we're going to create our first pipeline, and then I'm going to show you exactly the process of getting it all working in an automated fashion. So the first thing you do, you come up, you add your pipeline. Now, if you had other pipelines already existing, you can copy the detail from one, and therefore you're only making changes to the next one that you're adding. That's a really nice feature, and we'll see that when we do our next pipelines, because clearly at the moment we don't have one, so we can't copy from one. So we go no. We give it a pipeline name. We're going to call this our generic onboarding. And I save that. So see, it immediately defaults to some what we call our default pipeline statuses. This is our published, and you'll recall, and I will just come back and I'll just pop the spreadsheet back here so you can see it. So you recall that our published pipeline, we were just going to have my talented and interested. Why? Because no one's going to be applying. We're not going to ever publish this jobs for this pipeline, so we don't need to do anything. So for the moment, we would simply now remove our applied, because people are not applying for that job online. I'll just get my spreadsheet back. Just drag it to the side so that I can refer to it. Now, my unpublished pipeline, you'll remember we had an entry stage. We want to call it entry. So I'm going to change the name of this. This is the entry stage. Now what we want to do is candidates will come into the entry stage. Remember, if you look at the previous video, we parsed a CV, we said we wanted to onboard them, we selected the job we were onboarding them for, then it collected the pipeline that was associated with that job, the candidate entered the pipeline, and then they were moved automatically to the following stage. And the way we did that, they enter the stage. Is the stage complete? Yes, it is. Then when it's complete, automatically move the candidate from this stage to the stage number 100. And you'll recall, and I'll just do that, recall 100 is the order of the registration stage. So we'll go and create that. So there's our first change. The second thing is we're not inviting people into the pipeline. Invitations are typically related to when we're putting people into a roster. So we can delete the invited stage. We don't need that. My accepted stage is going to happen after induction, so we're going to specify that, and I like to put a big number on that, so I've got plenty of room to take between when the person finally gets to being accepted. Now note, when they accept them, we auto create them as an employee role. So what that means is that we're taking a candidate through the process, they're a candidate, they continue to be a candidate, and then when we finally move them into accepted stage, their profile changes, they become an employee, then their user experience when they're accessing the system themselves in their own right is representative of an employee rather than a candidate. So now we've got our auto create employee, so we'll save that. On our rejected, I don't like rejected. I think it's a bit of it's not a very friendly term, so we tend to call it unsuccessful. So we'll change that to unsuccessful. So, and we'll put that to 2000. So, this is happening way after the sense. And then later, we can actually create the particular kind of notification that we want to send to the candidates when they get moved into that stage. So now we've got entry stage, accepted, unsuccessful. So we need to do the rest. We're going to now do registration, right to work. We're going to do these 5 stages, and I'm going to create them into the pipeline stage. So let me do that now. So this one is called registration. Typically you give the code the same thing. I won't explain why we have a code. It's not really important. For you just carry on using the code and the title to be the same. It's for much more complex requirements, and we cover them in the administrative guide rather than the introductory guide that we're giving for you now. So the code 100, done. So then see, it's slopped in the middle because we've got this one starting at -1, this one's 1,000, so it's going to hop in here. So then we'll add our next one, which is a right to work check. Now again, we just use the same codes. This is going to happen at 200, and we're going to have it's a Vivo check, and when the Vivo check is finished, it's going to go to 300. In other words, the next stage after the Vivo check has been completed. So we'll save that. Here we are, it's popped in here. So now we're going to add our next one, which is of course the triage. And there's a lot of ways that we can handle interviews, but for this example, we're doing a standard interview where you'll get them into the stage and you'll manage that process directly. So we'll now give that, so that's a code 300, and we don't need to do anything more than that. Except another stage. This one now is going to be reference check. And I'm going to update this later because of course I haven't created the reference check, which is the concept about doing things backwards. So I'm going to explain that. So reference check, and then finally the last stage we want for our example pipeline is induction. And take that in at code 500. So this will be, so we're all done. So there is our unpublished pipeline for processing ad hoc candidates. Now we do have to add another stage in here. See, we've got live -1. I'm going to make that 1,000 because I need to add another one called onboarding. Onboard, and the reason I need to do that is because this job is never going to go live. Okay, so it's called onboard. So now we've got our pipeline for managing candidates into a generic situation. And what I mean by that is ad hoc candidates, remember, they're not applying for a specific job. We're bringing them in directly into the process, and we just want to get them into our workflow, into our pipelines, to get them ready to be employed as quickly and as seamlessly as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to finish the video now because that shows you this is really the first stage, which is creating your stages, explaining how we do it. And then in the next 2 videos, the next video I'm going to show you how we create the notifications for these 2 notifications. Then we're going to create the reference check because we want to say what are the questions we're going to ask the referees. And then we're going to get have a little bit more fun around some of the more complex assessments around candidate registration and induction. So thank you very much, and I look forward to taking you through the next stage.